Hello and welcome to the show. Now the relay races have been fantastic fun. However, the last one that we ran with the 2000 PI spread out across the 4 cars, you kind of favoured if you ran a Formula 1 car. They were so absurdly fast that it wasn't quite as balanced as I had hoped. So, reworked the rules slightly. Again, I like the theme of having the 2000 PI to play with, but this time you were not allowed to use cars higher than S-Class. We were also running with the theme a Nations Cup, if you will. Each team splits into different nations. We had Great Britain, Japan, America and Germany competing in this one. I was racing for Great Britain. Our first race was at the Indianapolis circuit, and Team Great Britain got off to a fantastic start, with the Tiger getting the best launch on the run down towards the first corner. Now, we had all opted to start with some of our slower cars, our D-Class cars, here, as the MX-5 give the Tiger a little bit of a nudge through the opening corner. Tiger gets a bit on the grass and just about manages to wiggle his way back onto the track. We're going 3 wide through the next corner. Now, this was all helping the Opel. The Opel was in D-Class, but it was like a mid-D-Class course. The PI saved on that was spent on the other cars, and the more that these 3 vehicles fought with one another, the more it helped the Germans, because their slower car was managing to keep up with these vehicles relatively well. The MX-5 did manage to get a little bit of a gap. Then the Scion and Tiger started having a battle on the way down the back stretch, as the Tiger has to go defensive, and this is all helping the German car. The Opel has managed to keep up with these what should be faster vehicles. It is now right there as they come through the final corners. It's also helping the MX-5 managing to escape a little bit at the front. The Opel actually has a go up the inside, never really likely to be able to get past the Scion. The Scion is going to be the slightly quicker car, but yeah, the Opel did a great job of hanging on, and we certainly weren't helping each other. All running, similar PI cars, we end up battling with each other. It's all slowing us down a little bit. So as we came to the first of the changeovers, the Japanese would hand over to their fastest car, the Supra, that would go up next. We would have a Corsa that was a mid-B class car, relatively fast Corsa. From us, the Americans would stick with the strategy of running their 2 slowest cars first, 2 D-Class cars first, as a Camaro would go chasing after the Corsa, and the Germans would be gradually getting faster with their vehicles, as the Chevy runs a little bit wide through the opening corner. The BMW was, well, a significantly faster car, spots a gap, and a considerably better handling one at that as well, finds his way up the inside of the Camaro. Now, one of the things that certainly does happen with this racing, is all very well and good having the faster car, but you have got to find ways past, and certainly getting stuck behind a slower vehicle, you can hold them off for a couple of corners possibly, and cost them a little bit of time. Our Corsa was having issues, a big 2-wheel moment across the curb. It was yeah, perhaps not quite as competitive as we had hoped. Struggled to really keep pace with the Supra and wasn't managing to pull as much of a gap to the vehicles behind as we were hoping. The Japanese would have a really rather sizable lead as they came for the next changeover, although they got slower cars to come. They'd used their fastest of the vehicles this time out and got them a nice lead, but they were running in clean air, which is always an advantage. As we came for our next changeover, I would set off with the Jaguar E-Type. Not the most impressive of launches. The gearbox in this, not fantastic. Didn't have the PI to fix it. We'd hand over in second place, relatively good positioning. However, I had a D-Class car as well, and, well, the Germans were sending out their fastest of the vehicles. There was not a huge amount that I could do. I was doing the utmost to try and kind of fend them off, but yeah, there's nothing really. When you've got such a vast difference in cars, I just couldn't fend off the BMW for more than a corner. I tried to cost him any time that I could, make it as awkward as possible to get past me, make him go the long way round, but yeah, at the end of the day, the D-Type wasn't going to be able to do much. However, we did have our fastest car going last, so if I could stay close, if I could stay in the battle with the BMW and the Corvette, then that would be good. Then it was for the final changeover as the Skyline gets underway, the slowest of the Japanese cars, back to a D-Class car. They had a huge lead, however, they were going to be being chased down by some of the fastest cars in the race, including our mid-A class Jaguar, which I believe was the highest PI of the lots. The Skyline not quite getting turn 1 correct. It wasn't just the Jaguar, though, that was coming quickly. The Americans had their fastest car, Pontiac GTO. I believe it was a B-class, like right top of B-class car. The GTO, a very, very fast vehicle in a straight line, useful around a circuit like this. However, it was not going to be enough. The Skyline had a big enough lead that the rest of us were not able to catch him, despite us having, you know, faster cars for this final lap. Couldn't quite do it. Likewise, the Jaguar was just a little bit too far back to do anything about this battle for second place. The BMW trying desperately to fend off the Pontiac as they come round the final corner. The GTO has to try and go the long way round and doesn't actually have the grip to make the move work. He's got the speed but couldn't hold it around the outside, which means that BMW would take second from the Pontiac right at the very end. On to race number 2, we would head to the ALP Circuit, and once more, we'd all gone for a similar strategy of sending out our D-Class cars first. We'd mixed it up, sending out my Jaguar as the first car for Team GB, and the Americans had sent out their Camaro. Once more, perhaps not the greatest of strategies as we again end up fighting with each other. The Opel was running just a little bit behind. Again, if he could repeat the same feat that he did in the first race, that would work out very, very nicely, potentially, for the German team. It's too wide as we come round some of the very, very fastest corners on this track, and as we come under braking and the tiniest of bumps between the Mazda and the Camaro. See the Chevrolet, unfortunately, in the barrier. I tried to profit as much as I can, but couldn't quite make the move stick. I wasn't quite sure how our cars were going to perform around the circuit. They're not to run Alps a huge amount on here, so yeah, mistakes quite easy to do. I remained on the bumper of the Mazda for the entire lap. Unfortunately, disaster would strike for Team GB early on as well. Some laggy issues going on with our second car meant the Corsa didn't set off anywhere near at the right time. You couldn't see where my car was on the track because apparently I was lagging around all over the place, which gave the Japanese a really rather massive lead. I think in the end the Corsa didn't set off until after the German car had gone, so yeah, that was a little bit of a shame for us at this stage of the race. The Americans were in just as much trouble as we were following their crash on the first run. They were sticking with their strategy of sending out their slower vehicles first. Everyone else was starting to mix things up with the faster cars. The Americans were sticking, though, with having their fastest vehicles run towards the end. Next changeover, well, the Germans had managed to close the gap massively on the Japanese, having sent out their fastest BMW 1M to try and reel in the leader. And sure enough, as they get the next cars underway, the Skyline would be sent out. The slower of the Japanese cars was being chased by the BMW. It was only going to be a matter of time. I mean, the Skyline did all that he could, you know, to try and make it a little bit awkward for the BMW, and sure enough, the BMW had a go at going around the outside. Couldn't quite make it stick, though, around there as he gets stuck on the outside. This is not necessarily the easiest of tracks to overtake around, that much is for sure. Very, very quick circuit. However, the Skyline runs a smidge wide, brushes the wall, and the BMW will get up the inside into the next corner as the Nissan goes for a little bit of an explore. We had hastily changed our strategy. We were going to run the Jaguar last, but we sent it out for the third run to try and reel in the cars up ahead. And sure enough, the Jaguar was flying around here. Caught to the back, the Skyline was doing a fantastic job of keeping up with the BMW, but there was never really going to be much that they could do about the Jaguar's speed as they head up towards the final corner. Now, just got the BMW to get past. The Jag couldn't quite do it on the final turn. Tried to get to the inside, gave the BMW a little bit of a tap, tries to get around the outside. There's not quite space there either, but the Jag is too quick in a straight line as we come down towards the line of cars. Gets into line as we hand over for the final stint. Our change of plan, though, did mean, while it kind of put us back in the race, it released the Sunbeam. However, there was a D-Class car against two C-Class cars, which was likely to make it a little bit difficult. Nevertheless, we did have the lead briefly in this one, and the Tiger was well within his rights to do as much defending as he possibly could, and was very much on the limit of what the Tiger could manage. And unfortunately, the two C-Class cars were just too fast for the Sunbeam. However, they were still going side by side up ahead through these really rather fast corners, and as anyone who's driven Alps knows, things can go wrong quite quickly. And sure enough, BMW just can't quite get stopped, and as he's stuck on the inside of the, I think it was the Subaru, they get connected together and both end up in exactly the same tyre bundle that the Camaro had crashed into on the first lap. Now they both recovered their vehicles, the BRZ a fraction faster. I believe it was the BRZ was sort of the top C class, the BMW not quite at the top of its class. The Subaru would get himself up into second, but that big crash had cost them. They'd given too much of a lead away to the Sunbeam, and the Americans were coming back strong towards the end of the race. So every single one of the teams had some form of disaster befall them in this particular race, and out of it all, the great British team would come home to take victory, with the Tiger doing a great job on the final run there. Yeah, it certainly was an exciting and eventful relay race. The Americans were catching so quickly at the end, their fastest car once more catching to the back of the German vehicle, but just ran out of time as they crossed the line. For the second race in a row, the Americans would have to follow the BMW across the line. It's incredibly close. Yeah, pretty much all of us had a disaster at some point before us, which made it a rather interesting race. Our final one would go to the Sebring Circuit, and tactics were all changed. Having had both of our early races with the low PI cars starting out and battling each other and slowing each other down, everybody, apart from Team GB, changed their strategy. They'd hoped to use faster cars to get them in clear air, and of course then each other did the same thing, and it didn't quite work as they had planned, as the Supra and Corvette up in B class were trying to, running clean air, and then you end up fighting each other. The Germans were running their C-Class BMW, and I didn't really have to worry about being stuck in battles because I had, the slower car here. The Corvette was having a look, trying to find a way past on that Supra. Not quite close enough, although the Corvette did have relatively good straight line speed as we head down this back straight, and of course if these cars could fight one another, would be very useful to us further back if they can slow each other down. The Corvette, though, not quite having the performance to really run with the Toyota. Tried his best, but they couldn't really quite get it stopped at the hairpin, and would gradually start to lose time over the course of the lap. Likewise, I was unable to quite keep up with the M3, wasn't dropping back too far, and of course this was good news. If I could keep close to the BMW, it meant that the cars that would go later in our run would stand a little bit more of a chance. I was holding on okay. The E-Type, I quite liked it, I've got to say. It was quite a nice, solid car. As we come to the line for the first of the changeovers, the Japanese would send out their Skyline next, the Americans sending out their Scion, so they were sticking with running the slower cars for this next run, trying to save at least one of the quick vehicles for later on in the race. The Japanese had actually got a relatively sizable lead in this one as well. So yeah, the Scion had quite a lot of work to do. The Germans sent out their fastest car for this next round. The 1M would make short work of chasing down the Scion, and again, the way the BMW caught the Scion and the sort of speed difference between them, there's not very much the American car could have done in this one to slow the BMW, to try and defend from it. Essentially, when you get caught on a straight like that, you're not going to stand a chance against. I'm pretty sure the BMW was a very low A class, but you're just not going to be able to fight off a car that is that much quicker than your vehicle. However, despite having a D-Class car as well, the Skyline had so much of a lead that the BMW couldn't quite catch it as they came towards the finish line, which meant that the Germans had used up their fastest of the cars and, had not quite been able to take the lead. It was definitely advantage Japan at this moment in time as the Skyline would set off. After a surprise victory in the second race, once more we were going with our strategy of sending out the Jaguar for our third run. The Corsa had not really made any gains in its particular run. Again, Corsa struggled around this circuit, and the Jaguar would, well, make short work of the D-Class American car and go blasting off after the leader. We still had quite a lot of work to do as we'd, well, used our two faster cars, meaning once more it's going to come down to the Sunbeam to finish off the Germans. Well, the Opel GT was never really likely to stand much of a chance against the Jaguar. It's just so much absurdly faster than the Opel. It would put us in relatively good stead, but once more, that Japanese car, well, as you can see it in the distance, was quite a long way ahead. They'd got a very, very good lead going on. The American car was quite a long way back. They'd have a lot of work to do with the GTO. Now, the Jag, well, we were hoping that we could at least transfer over with the lead, and maybe we could have another surprise result coming in to the final lap. I mean, the laps around here are relatively long. The MX-5 did what it could, but is never going to have the grip to compete with an A-Class Jaguar. And sure enough, once more, the British would have the lead coming on to the final leg, and the Tiger would have a hell of a lot of work to do if it was to keep some much, much faster cars behind. The BRZ would not have a huge amount of sort of space to make up, essentially, as they run down towards the first corner here. The Tiger, again, going to do as much as he can to try and fend the vehicle off, but at Sebring, where there are some, pretty sizable straights, there is only so much that you can do. The BRZ not quite close enough into this first corner, as the Tiger does what he can to make the car as wide as possible, but there is only so much little British sports car, and Subaru with a wheel across the curb would get it to the inside and would be able to out-drag the Tiger. And barring a freak accident for the BRZ, we always knew that this was likely to be the kind of outcome here. We had hoped that maybe we could get the car far enough, the Tiger far enough ahead, that the German and American car wouldn't quite be able to catch him, but as we came around the back of the circuit, they were coming very, very quickly as the Tiger tries to go defensive, but the BMW is there and has got so much more speed, can get the vehicle up the inside, and then comes the Pontiac as well around the outside of the Tiger. Pontiac's to the inside as they head towards the final straight. Even if the Tiger had held them off through there, it would have been inevitable with the straight line speed difference between the cars. The Pontiac, though, does manage to get ahead of the BMWs. For the first time in this session, the American car would not have to follow a BMW across the finish line. At the front, though, victory would go to the Japanese vehicles. While, yes, it was gradually being caught by the Pontiac and BMW, it was not enough. They'd built up a big enough lead early on that they could come across the line and take victory number 2. You can see the two cars following in the background. Unfortunately, Great Britain came last in this one. However, it was quite a lot of fun, actually. Corsa was a little bit rubbish, but aside from that, it was a really rather good fun racing, this one. Plenty of tactics were involved in it. Certainly, the car builds were relatively similar. None of us went really crazy. No one ran up into like an S-Class car. They were all sort of slightly different, though, with the Great British team opting to run some faster cars. You know, we had an A-Class car, but that did mean we had to have kind of 2 D-Class. We had to have a compromised B-Class car, and so on. Other teams going for a little bit more balanced strategy. It was, certainly an interesting one, building cars up for it and seeing how the races pan out. Definitely trying to get your cars in clean air is just so important in this, and that's kind of what goes on with the strategy. You know, what cars do you start with? Where do you run? Who do you run? What part of the race? We saw everything go wrong at Alps when you don't quite get the strategy right. You know, when you're running close together, accidents can happen. Little bumps can cause large issues. So yeah, I really do thoroughly enjoy doing these relay races, and certainly this one perhaps my favourite of the ones that we have done so far. Definitely the balancing was a lot better in this, when you kind of say don't go too crazy with the PI. You know, the Formula 1 cars are just too ridiculous for the PI and so on. Yeah, it was an awful lot of fun. However, that is it for this video, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.